Good morning. I want to thank you for being here, and I want to thank you for inviting me to share my experiences with you. I am passionate about the effect that mental illness has on our lives and what God can do through it. And I believe with all my heart that God brings things into our lives for a reason. And I don't presume to know what those reasons are. I am not God. I do not know. But I do know, I believe, that today, right here, right now, is a big part of God's plan for all of us here today. So we're really glad that you are here. My struggle with depression and with anxiety has been going on in my life for many years, even though I only first sought treatment about 5 years ago. When I did seek treatment, my diagnosis was general anxiety disorder with agoraphobia, which is basically a fear of things outside your home, just the world, along with depression. I won't get too much into the nitty-gritty details of what my life with these disorders is like, because I just don't think that's why we're here today. But for the purpose of understanding and for illustration, I will share a little bit about what I dealt with on a day-to-day basis and kind of what I still deal with sometimes still today. I think I've lived with these disorders for most of my life. As a child, I don't think that it was apparent that there was anything clinically wrong with me. I think I came across more as a shy, nervous, kind of easily stressed child. I was told all the time that I was too sensitive, that I worried too much, and those things may well have been true. But I think they were really a sign of something bigger and something deeper going on in my heart. As I grew older, that shy sensitivity kind of matured and evolved into something that just looked more like fear. I was just scared. I was nervous. I was anxious. I was overwhelmed and just fearful of the world. Often people think of depression as being just this deep and penetrating sadness, but in my experience, depression is more like a complete void of emotion. You feel nothing. I felt empty, I felt lifeless, I felt like I was just a shell of myself. Sometimes, though, my mind was really in control, working overtime just to fill my head with all these horrible things that would happen in my day, horrible things about myself and my family. I was always on one end of that spectrum or the other. I was either feeling absolutely nothing, completely dead and lifeless on the inside, as though some unseen force had just sucked the life right out of me, or I was feeling every emotion known to man all at the same time. Anger, fear, sadness, panic. Panic attacks just became a way of life for me. And as a result of that, many times I couldn't get myself out of bed. I couldn't get myself out of the house for days at a time. That was just my reality. And I kind of just resigned myself that I had to live that way. I kind of was convinced that if I left my house, bad things would happen. If I talked to people, they would think badly of me. And so I didn't do those things. And I just became convinced that this feeling, or this absence of feeling, if it were, was just something I had to live with. It was just the way my life was going to be. And let me say here that I was newly married at the time that things got really bad for me. I was part of a new and vibrant church community, so in no way was I really physically alone. I felt like I was, though. And that made it very, very real to me. I felt as though I was completely alone in the world. Try as I could, I was not able to explain how I was feeling to the people that were around me. My husband tried very hard to understand, and he loved me very well in spite of not understanding. My church community, I think, could tell that something was going on with me, but maybe didn't really know what. They didn't know what to do. I was surrounded by people, but I really was alone. I was alone and just hopeless in the struggle I was going through. Even when people wanted to help, they didn't know what to do because they weren't there themselves. It's just not something that people on the outside can understand. I finally did see a doctor. I went on a number of different medications in an effort to kind of level out what was seeming to be some sort of an imbalance that was going on inside me. Each pill would help for a short time, and then it would just get bad all over again. And I just kind of started thinking this was just the way I had to live. This was just what God had for me. This is just the way my life was going to be. Even once that medication puzzle was resolved and I started leveling out a little bit, things were not all better. And it really was just, this is my reality. I'm going to be depressed. I'm going to be anxious. I'm going to be scared. This is just the way my life is going to be. I've mentioned already how my mind was kind of my worst enemy when I was struggling with anxiety. And to help you understand how I felt, I'd like for you to imagine for just a minute that childhood game of tug of war. You probably remember playing that, where there are the two sides just tugging with all they've got on two ends of the rope. They're just yanking and pulling, giving it everything they've got, trying to get that knot in the middle of the rope to come to their side. They're both pulling so hard. And sometimes the battle would end really quickly if the sides were embarrassingly outmatched, right? And sometimes it would go on and on and on if they were kind of equally matched. But eventually one side has to win. One side will win. And when it does, the game is over and the losing side tumbles to the ground. It just collapses, unable to stand up to that weight on the other end. It's kind of a funny illustration, but for me, this is a very vivid description of my life with mental illness. In the past, and still sometimes today, I am at war with thoughts that are out of my control. My mind runs out of control, just tugging and pulling at me, and there's nothing I can do to stop it. I have lies, anxious thoughts, irrational fears, just bombarding my mind all the time. Sometimes I'm unable to stand up to its strength, and like the losing team, in a game of tug of war, I collapse. There have been many, many times that with my energy gone, I have just curled up in bed, attempting to escape this chaotic emptiness that is going on in my head with sleep. My will to fight is sometimes gone, and sometimes I don't care if I win or lose. Fighting just seemed futile in the past, and I resigned myself to living that way. A couple of years ago here at Quest, we were given nails like this one, as a reminder of what Jesus did for us when he died on the cross. I kept that nail on my nightstand for whatever reason. It probably just kind of landed there when I got home from church that day. And I remember in one of my darkest times rolling over in the early morning light and seeing this nail laying there. And I remember I was dreading the day, as I always did. I was trying to put it off as long as I could. And I saw the nail laying there. And I remember my thoughts very clearly. I thought, Jesus did not die for me to live this way. This is not the life he promised me. This is not life. Now, I realize that those words sound like they could be self-defeating, and they sound like they might have made me feel even worse than I already did. I don't recommend taking this approach with somebody you know who is struggling, unless you know them very, very well and know how they would receive those words. But for me, that is exactly what I needed to hear. That is exactly what God knew I needed. He gave me that message that morning to snap me to attention. Because see, for so long, I had just been trying to fight this battle all by myself. I thought my burdens were mine and mine alone. I thought they were too much for anybody else to understand, so there was no point in sharing them with anybody. I had been convinced that I had to live with the problem, and it never occurred to me that not only did the people who were surrounding me, not only did they care, but they wanted to help me carry the burden. Not only that, but God did too. See, I had heard that before, but until that morning, I never really realized that God was right there in the middle of it, and that God wanted to help me fight this. He was in the middle of the struggle and wanted to help me fight. Now, I know this is true from my own experience. I feel it, but it's also true scripturally. It's there in black and white. The book of Deuteronomy says that the Lord your God is the one who goes with you to fight for you against your enemies to give you victory. And that when you don't have the strength to fight anymore, when you can't stand, when you have nothing else to give, the Lord your God himself will fight for you. Friends, hear me. This battle, no battle, is ours to fight alone. God wants to fight with us. And when we invite him onto the battlefield with us, he will fight to the finish. He has promised that he will do that. Now think again about the childhood game of tug of war. Remember when you picked sides, there's that one kid, that really big, burly kid that everybody's like, I want that kid on my team. He's big. If he's on my team, I'm going to win. Everybody knew that. He would anchor it. He would hold them down. And with him on their end of the rope, they would not be the ones to crumble and fall to the ground. Well, God has shown me that he has weapons for me to use in this battle against mental illness. He is a weapon for me. I know that I have the strongest player on my end of the rope. I know that he is fighting for me and he is pulling with me. And when I can't pull or fight or give anything else, he continues to fight. I won't be the one to fall. I won't. Discovering God's power in my battles was pivotal in overcoming the crippling effects of mental illness in my life. When I discovered that God cared and fought with me, I was strengthened for battle in a way that I had never experienced before. When I learned that God has a will and a plan for my life, I was able to get perspective and see that while these illnesses are very much something that I have, they are not something that I am. They are a part of my story, but they are far from being the whole story. Briefly, I'd like to tell you very specifically about how I believe God stepped into my life, stepped into my struggle to pull me out of depression and settle my mind on his truth. These things I very sincerely believe saved my life. First, God put me in positions that were far out of my comfort zone, far from my bed, I assure you, and showed me potential in myself that I never dreamed was there. While I was still dealing with panic attacks, uncontrollable fear, and while I really just wanted to become invisible, God somehow placed a microphone in my hand, got me up on stage in front of my church every single Sunday morning. Every Sunday morning. And through that, he showed me that I have gifts he has placed inside of me, gifts that I wasn't utilizing, gifts I had no idea I even had, gifts that can be used for something larger than myself. Second, things in my life that I had been doing suddenly took on new meaning. I had been blogging for several years before the Lord just turned the entire focus of my writing around and showed me how my words and my experiences can be used for him, for something larger than myself. He helped me to see that others can benefit from hearing about my experiences, whether they are about depression and anxiety or not. Through writing and my blog, the Lord has shown me that none of us are in this alone, and that sometimes all we have to do is take the first step, and we'll find so many others who are in it with us. Third, God began showing himself to me in ways I never anticipated. I see him moving in the ordinary and easily overlooked areas of life. Recognizing his hands in those moments helped me to understand that this world is not centered on me. This world does not hinge on my emotions. I constantly see parallels between God's heart and his nature and the world around us. And through that, I've come to understand him more and more. Even better, I get the amazing privilege of sharing those insights with my church family on a daily or weekly basis, and on my blog daily if I feel like it. I've really come to see how I am a really small part of a really big picture, that God is bigger than I know, and that he graciously chooses to incorporate me into his plan. My life is about something bigger than myself. Please hear me. There is a trend here. My life is not about me anymore. It's about him and about what I can do for him. It's hard for me to feel the way I once did when he has changed the way I think and the way I feel and the way I see the entire universe in a different way. He is using my experiences with depression and with anxiety and with agoraphobia to make me into the person I was created to be. And please hear this. Please hear this. I do not believe that the Lord caused my illness. I don't believe that. It is not his will that any of us should suffer in this life. However, suffering will come. And when it does, he may allow it for the purposes of refining us. He may allow suffering so that we can pursue him in a new way and see him more clearly. He may allow it because really it may be the only way of getting us where he needs us to be. Most importantly, like he did in my life, he may allow suffering so that we can see that he is God, we are not, and sometimes that just has to be enough. My mantra through my illness that I have recited to myself over and over and over again, it comes from Deuteronomy as well. It's Deuteronomy 31:6. God says, "Be strong, courageous, and firm. Fear not, nor be in terror before them, for it is the Lord your God who goes with you. He will not fail you. He will not forsake you." That truth has resonated in my heart as I have just seen God work that in my life. Let that be an encouragement to you. I've seen it. It's true. The Lord, the one who sculpted the universe and carved a place in it for you, loves you. He cares for you. He is fighting for you. He will not fail you. And he has a plan for you. I've seen that truth in my life. I know it is true. And in my heart, I know that it's true for you as well. Thank you.